Welcome to Citizen Assembly Thunderdome, where we test ideas and hone debate skills in a real-life social political arena with the goal of holistic balance. If you'd like to participate, find out how in our podcast description. We're going to start with a round of introductions from our panelists, so we've each got about 30 seconds apiece to tell our listeners a little bit about ourselves and what we stand for. So I will begin. My name is Megan, and I live in Texas. And I'm actually working on rewriting what I stand for because it changes, the way I say it changes every time, but I basically education, human nutrition, and just overall community well-being, but I'm going to nail it down for next time. So Stacy, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Stacy Gustafson. I split my time between Northern Michigan and Southwest Texas, and my major focus is holistic community problem solving, and we are actually starting a community on an application, and we will keep you posted about that. Very exciting. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Cynthia, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm so excited. I'm very grateful to be here. My name is Cynthia Leonard. I am in the Chicagoland area, the Big Windy, and I promote and organize for Egora-ilp.org and produce content for Radio Hydrogen, who we are working in conjunction with on Hypatia's Kitchen and University. So I'm really excited about the future, and I can't wait to see where all we go. Oh, and 214 Alpha is also working in conjunction with us, for which I'm very grateful. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Cynthia. Dan, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Dan Bader. I live in Chicago. I'm retired from the Chicago Department of Public Health. My interests are public health, mental health, abrupt climate change, and a lot of my energy these days is concerned with COVID-19, vaccines, biowarfare, that area. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, Dan. Marcin, welcome again. Could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Marcin. I'm a software engineer, and I'm just focused on inequality at this point. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Marcin. Cesare, would you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Megan. I am Cesare from the Chicagoland area. My focus is on ethics and animal liberation and on economics and on social and economic justice. I'm very excited about today's discussion. It's great being at a meeting that you don't have to run. So yeah, I'm gonna give it hell. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Cesare. Ramses, welcome. Would you please introduce yourself?
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, my name is Ramses. I'm from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I'm a valedictorian, and I hope you can see it pretty well on my name. And I'm sorry, I'm not at home at the moment, so I'm gonna be listening to you guys.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, Ramses. We appreciate it. Joe, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Joe. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. My concerns are like alternative currencies and societal structures and things. And I'm in Mexico City right now, waiting for a plane that I thought was going to be today. It's not till tomorrow morning. So I'm looking for something to do to pass the time. And I thought you guys would be great.
Awesome. Well, you made a good choice. Cool. Alex, welcome. Would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Kratz. I'm interested in science and technology, and I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion.
Okay, awesome. So we've now heard from everybody, and we are now going to move into the presentation of today's idea. I'm going to be presenting my idea, which is we need less school, not more. So this idea is written up in Egora. So if you choose to support it, it will be in there, and I'll also link it in the chat as well. All right, we need less school, not more. Colonial America lacked compulsory government schooling laws, yet it possessed two factors that are seldom discovered in modern society: personal independence and personal isolation. Back then, men were self-employed craftsmen, farmers, or small businessmen who lived in rural communities where every family had their own acreage of land. These people did not depend on the central government for resources, and they had plenty of time for quiet thought, reflection, and community. The children who were raised in these times had the best education possible, that of experience. Their greatest teacher was life itself. Products of this lifestyle, like Benjamin Franklin, Horace Mann, and Thomas Jefferson, led very successful livelihoods, though they received little to no schooling. Nowadays, schooling is at an all-time high, and the quality of life is only diminishing. A working couple today holds less buying power combined than a singular man did 150 years ago. So both parents now work 9-to-5 jobs for faceless corporations, forcing the children to go to school during the day to be raised by strangers. Communities have been replaced by networks, and people are more disconnected from reality than ever. Sure, they may be highly schooled with their bachelor's, master's, and PhDs, but that doesn't mean that they're well educated. They've learned to use their mouths to recite information, yet they never were taught to use their brains to actually think for themselves. It's important to distinguish between the phrases schooling and education. The concepts are oxymorons. While they may be grouped together and used interchangeably, they're far from synonymous. Education is an intimate experience one undergoes as he seeks to know himself, while schooling is the forceful imposing of one's beliefs upon another. And in American society, it's so that his patterns of behavior are predictable and his future easily controlled. A more appropriate word for schooling is not education, but rather indoctrination. Did you know that the word educate is actually derived from a Latin term educar, which means to bring forth from within? Therefore, education is a process of self-realization, and any form of learning that does not begin with the self as the centerpiece is flawed. So allow me to introduce you to the modern American school system, which is strategically structured to ensure that education doesn't occur. And this was confirmed by the former U.S. Commissioner of Education in 1889, Mr. William T. Harris, who wrote that our schools had been scientifically designed to prevent overeducation from happening. One can't help but wonder what our schools are doing for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 9 months a year, if they're not educating our children. Think about that. In 1916, the dean of the Stanford School of Education and one of the most prominent figures in shaping modern American education, Elwood P. Cubberley, wrote that our schools are in a sense factories in which the raw products, the children, are to be shaped and fashioned to meet the various demands of life. Johann Fichte, who was a prominent German philosopher who was behind the Prussian education system, which did become the American education system, believed that education should aim at destroying free will so that after pupils are thus schooled, they will be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished. Unfortunately, it is so that our schools and all the entities that work within it, whether they're conscious of it or not, toil vigorously to teach our children that their lives are insignificant. The constant ringing of the bells teaches them that nothing is too important to focus on, and being raised in a sea of strangers teaches students that family life and communities are things of the past. School teaches our children to disregard themselves entirely and see their peers as unfit to rule. School teaches a child everything he needs to know except himself, the most important concept to master. And so the student wears a mask in public and in private, and he becomes a stranger, even to himself. Does it really make more sense to advocate for more schooling? That concludes the idea. Now we're going to show of hands who is in general support of this idea. Great, so we have Marcin, Cynthia, okay, Cesare, wow, I'm surprised. And Stacy, and Dan's like half. Okay, that's more than my usual ideas. So well, actually, I don't think anybody's supporting this
Wait,
idea.
I support. I just don't know how to raise my hand.
Okay, awesome.
Although I am a valedictorian, but I'm supporting this.
Okay, awesome. Stacy, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm not sure. So what I've got down is Joe and Alex are abstaining, but everybody else was on board.
Yeah, Dan and Cesare were so-so. They were half.
I'm so as well.
Okay.
Okay.
So, and I'm not going to ask about Egora because I just put it in before this, so I don't think anybody's supporting it now, although you can. So we're going to go ahead and move into discussion. Would anybody like to start us off? Cesare, go ahead.
So I'm actually going to support this idea, at least temporarily. With maybe I'm going to make some edits, just formatting edits, and I'm going to be, but I will be supporting it as the truths we should all know category of ideas. It's not going to be in the main Egora. I mean, in general, I don't think school is a bad thing. I think, but I think it actually is true that students probably spend too much time in school. And of course, it depends at which level. You know, if we're talking about grade school versus high school versus university, so that could all be treated differently. But I think for grade school, I think it's true that students spend too much time in school and they should have more real life experience. So, and I think there is a lot of truth to what you're saying. I don't know if I like all of it, but I think it's there are truths here that everyone should know. So, like I said, I'm actually going to be supporting it in the community Egora, and maybe reworking it periodically. But that's all I have to say for right now.
Great points. I definitely agree. It could be reworked and reformatted for sure. So thank you for your feedback, Cesare. Cynthia, what do you have to say?
Pretty much what Cesare said. I just wrote it in the chat.
Okay, perfect.
But I the part because I did have some issues with this idea, only insofar as no, I don't think that education should be extended, but I do believe that there should be resources into being able to pay teachers so you have people that actually care about their job and can afford to live on what they're being paid to teach children. And I absolutely agree with, you know, to know the self is job one. And if we're not working to get people to know thyself, then they shouldn't be working at all. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a really great point. Thank you, Cynthia. Stacy, what's on your mind?
I just want to jump on the bandwagon and say how awful school is. I hated it. The way that they allow children to treat each other, the way they move us around, the way teachers have too much authority and bring too much of their personal abuses to the classroom. And geniuses don't do well in school. I mean, just over and over, the best students have to figure out how to make their way outside of school, or they leave it. And the idea that school is created to free up the parents so that they can work is just obvious. Really never thought about that before, but yeah, that's awful. So.
Great point, Stacy. Joe, what do you have to say?
I think we definitely need some kind of alternative for educating ourselves. I mean, I don't know what it is. I agree that school is basically intentionally or not just numbing the mind of people. And maybe it's just, you know, in this country, or maybe it's everywhere. I'm not exactly sure. I want to say everything was great until you got to the part about like masks. And I was just like wondering why you had to throw that in there. It just seemed not relevant to the subject.
Okay, good point. I actually wasn't meaning masks, like physical masks. I meant like mask as in like people go out in society and wear. It's kind of a bad time to put the word mask, but I was referring to like just wearing a mask in general. People don't even know themselves, and so they're going into society as strangers to themselves. They're not like how many people can say they wear their natural expression? That's what I was meaning.
Or even know what their natural expression would be if they were to actually know themselves.
Yeah, it was basically to talk about the like kind of group mindset that school. Yeah. But anything else you wanted to add, Joe?
No, that was it. No, good article for essay. Yeah, it's nice.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so I'm up after myself. Will be Ramses and then Dan. So there's two things I wanted to talk about. One is what I actually think would be better for education, because I didn't mention it in there, just because I'm not actually sure how to write it yet, but I do have some thoughts on that. But I want to comment on what Stacy said too. Yeah, about taking the kids away from the family. That's actually one of the structures or one of the core foundations of school. And if anybody really wants to look more into it, you can read, there's a book called The Principles of Secondary Education by somebody named Alexander Ingalls. And he has a Harvard lecture hall named after him. He was really big in shaping education. Basically, So in his book, he talks about the core functions of school. And one of the ones in there is the destruction of the family. Because what the school system wants is they want to see the state as the authority. And you can't have that if you look at your parents as the authority. So it's basically about removing parents from the authority, and you think of the state as the authority. And that's why school's indoctrination. And then alternate solution. This is what I'm going to do with my life. And it's more so if other people want to follow. I honestly don't expect this to be a mainstream thing. But the alternate solution, the way I'm going to raise my kids is going to be no school at all, homeschool, but more so life experience. They're going to learn basic things. So a homestead.
Hey man, I'm so sorry. I just realized that the lockdown is going to be in 1 hour from now, right? So would you mind if I change the destination? We are going to head to Hoshilaka. I'm going to change the destination. Is that okay? Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I didn't know Ramses was saying something. I think that was a side conversation. Sorry, Ramses. I muted you. But back to what I was saying. So giving kids real life experiences. So they're going to be out working on the farm when they're like 5 years old. They can, milk the cow or follow their dad around or whatever. So they can learn life experience when they're younger, basic things, finances and all of that. But once they're a little bit older, maybe 8 or 9, and they start to have their own individual interests, I'm going to cultivate that. So if they like horses, then we're going to get a horse and they can learn horseback riding. Or if they really like a certain, they can start their own chicken business and sell stuff at the farmer's market. Or if they're really interested in selling crystals, they can go do in-person apprenticeships. But the big thing is the classroom should be life experience, and education should be something really intimate within a family or a very small community. Because the second you bring people into huge classrooms and you try to make everybody learn the same things, it doesn't work, because we all learn differently. We all have our own unique interests, and we should really focus on cultivating that individualism rather than suppressing it and trying to make people be all the same thing. Okay, Ramses, you are up. And you're muted, Ramses, so I don't know if you're speaking.
Hi, does anybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah, I'm sorry. How was I unmuted?
Because we heard you having a side conversation.
Shit, I'm so sorry. So you can hear me now.
Yeah, that's okay.
I was gonna say that something. Sorry, someone mentioned is that the school is not bad. I wanted to reply to that. No, school is terrible. It is not bad. It's terrible. And in my opinion, like look at the people. So what did the school do to them? Like we have like a whole society of ignorant people. They are still ignorant, right? So we didn't change them. And everybody is forced to go to the school every day in the morning, and they hate and exams, stress, and of course depression. School depression is very famous. It's very popular phenomenon. And finally, what I wanted to say here, although I am a valedictorian, but but I feel other people. I would prefer to go to school and have the resources for myself. You don't need to provide the resources for people who don't want it and who don't need it. And in that case, taxes will be used in a more efficient way. And that's for me.
Great points, Ramses. Dan, you are up.
Yeah, so I do think that the curriculum or the curricula that are offered in so much of public education and private education, parochial type schools, it's very standardized in certain ways, and they don't include information and education that's really essential. They don't teach people how to take care of themselves in terms of their health. They do not teach people something about how the legal system works. I personally, I did not like school. As a matter of fact, I quit high school. I went to 3 different high schools, and I just found it very, very oppressive on many levels. And I remember when I quit high school, and my advisor was kind of shocked, because it didn't really happen that often where I was going to high school. And I just felt like it was totally liberating to be free from, this such a repressive, kind of autocratic system. And I did, and then when I went back to high school and I was out for maybe a year, and I went back in Chicago. We used to have a place called Central YMCA High School, and that's where I returned to. And that was a place where everybody who went there had to be at least 16, and we had people, in their early 20s too. And the way they had that high school set up, they had pretty decent teachers, and they kind of ran it where you would go to your classes. So I would go to 2 classes a day, and then, the 10-week instead of, the semesters. They didn't have all of the, library and gym and ROTC and, all of these things that they had going on. And I actually learned more there in a very brief period of time. And I do think, because, they were teaching psychology classes there, which I was very interested in. And I do think, and I also, I taught school for a year and a half, and 8th grade and freshman high school. And I taught social studies, and I would definitely try to change, I would try to change the curriculum, because, I thought there were many more interesting ways of conveying, like social science information. But the way things are set up, it's just an authoritarian, very bureaucratic kind of a system. And I really respect what it is you're saying in terms of there's a lot of other things that would be very beneficial for students to learn. I mean, everybody's got to learn to read. You have to, read, write, do a certain level of calculation, these kinds of things. But on the other hand, there's just so many subjects that they're not exposed to, and they're not taught to critically think, in my opinion. You're not going to get that in most educational settings.
Yeah, lots of really great points, Dan. Thank you for sharing. Cesare is up next.
I gotta say, it's like this instinct in me is saying, like, no, you cannot get rid of all that repression. You have to repress people. You have to force them to learn how to follow rules so they can actually exist in society, or it's going to be a mess. It's going to be chaos. So I think the repression is kind of a good thing. People need to know that there are rules that they have to follow. I say this half jokingly, but it's kind of true. Like, seriously. But I don't know, but maybe, looking at like, and I don't know to what degree, like, for example, Finland imposes rules and order on students, because Finland supposedly has the best education system in the world. And so it might not be all that repressive. It might still be able to teach children rules and order without being repressive. So maybe there's a way to do both of that. But the point that Ramses was making, like people go to school and they're still ignorant. Well, people would be even more ignorant if they didn't go to school. So people definitely do need to go to school. Yeah, and the other thing that I like about school is I think, and this is something that I'm experiencing as an activist and as somebody trying to reach out to the population, and share, like, and specifically I'm talking about Egora and Citizen Assembly and the International Logic Party, and trying to promote that. And actually, I think we would be able to bring a lot more people to our meetings if we would have access to the university students. So frankly, that demographic, that like 18 to 30, maybe even, that demographic of people, especially the fact that they're concentrated in one place and they're exploring ideas, it actually creates this incubator of for ideas to be exchanged, for people to innovate things, and for people with ideas to be able to more quickly share those ideas. So, I mean, we are bringing some great people to our meetings, through social media, but it's actually kind of it's quite difficult. But if we were able to reach out to university students much more directly, if the universities were open, because they're closed because of COVID right now, but I think we would be getting a lot more engagement in democracy. So I think the universities serve a really great purpose by bringing all those people together and creating like this central point where activists and people looking to share ideas can actually tap into that social, you could say, like it's almost like a system of veins and arteries within a society, because then you can share ideas much more quickly and incubate them and so on. So yeah, if more people were doing, or if we only had homeschooling, it would be very difficult to access these young, fresh minds looking for new and better ways of doing things. So I think there's a lot of value in actually aggregating those people together in one place. I yield. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Cesare. So a couple of things that I have to comment on, specifically things that Cesare had mentioned. If you talk about the need to repress people, then you have to acknowledge the fact that it has nothing to do with education, because the definition of education is to bring forth from within. So that's where it comes. If you want to use schooling to suppress people, then call it what it is. It has nothing to do with learning or education. It's just imposing of one's belief upon another. Also, the suppression of people is only an issue because we live unnaturally. People are completely removed from reality, and they're trying to find meaning. If they live naturally, they would have the meaning, as we've seen we have Amish communities, but also the primitive people, which I've discussed multiple times. There's no need for suppression. And the primitive communities, they always leave their doors unlocked. They leave their valuables out. They trust each other. There's no crime. There's no need for people to act out or rebel, because they're nourished, and they're also content and happy because they live naturally. So it's just like using the example I use with food and bacteria. Bacteria are not the issue. They form as a result of the toxins that accumulate, just like raccoons are not the cause of garbage. Raccoons come when you leave garbage out. The same thing with the need to suppress people is not the core issue. The core issue is unnatural living in society and suppressing people through education. And now you keep trying to suppress the people, but it's never going to work. People are always going to be unhappy. People are always going to rebel because you're oppressing a part of their soul. Also, you could easily access a lot of very intelligent people, homeschooling co-ops. I'm not saying everybody should be isolated and only learn by themselves. I think there's a lot of, valuable ways to learn in group settings through apprenticeships and all of that. But there's a lot of homeschooling co-ops and different organizations that you could reach out to. And a lot of those people are a lot more intellectually developed than the average person in school. So those are, I believe, all the points that I wanted to make as of now. So after myself is Alex.
Sure. I think there's Joe brought up a question. Sorry, trying to find it. I think he asked, are we differentiating between K through 12 schools and higher education? And I think that's a very good point, because at least for K through 12 education, this is definitely clear that it's far from a perfect system. I think, as Dan pointed out, there are some basic skills that can be imparted through a schooling format that I think a lot of people would find broadly applicable and necessary to basic human life in a modern society, obviously. And I think it might interest you to know, Megan, that like higher education, like a PhD, is modeled after an apprenticeship. you're working with a mentor as an apprentice in the pursuit of knowledge in the form of research. And so I think making that distinction is valuable. Furthermore, I think the biggest crime, at least in higher education, is this sort of message that has been sold to American people that getting a college degree is some key to your future. And the price of education is just an even bigger crime, in my opinion. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree, Alex. Great points. Ramses, you are up next. And you're still on mute, so I don't. Okay, there you go.
So can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. I agree with most of the points that you have raised, guys. And I would say the thing about ignorance, okay? Ignorance is not a problem. I don't find ignorance as a bad or negative thing. That's why when in our previous meetings, whenever I told someone, hey, I think you are ignorant about this or that, I know that it sounded really harsh. It sounded really as if, I'm making an ass off of that person. But in my opinion, this is not the case. It's fine. You don't have to know everything in the world. Okay, it's like, for example, the knowledge or study about Ikhshid Empire, for instance, the history of Ikhshid Empire. How would that help you being a driver, being a truck driver, or whatever? It's not going to help you with anything. It's just wasting your time and pushing you under stress, right? And back in the day, I don't want to give the Roman Empire as an example, but at least the Egyptian civilization, Sumerian and Assyrian and many other civilizations, they were very successful and people didn't know how to read or write, okay? And when it comes to reading and writing, you can educate people at home or whatever. And if you are looking for group settings, then I really suggest sports, like going to sports, going to the club, taking your kids to the club, and of course, doing something like music or arts. Just find what your kid is passionate about. And that's it.
Great points, Ramses. Thank you so much. Cynthia, you are next. If you're and you're on mute, Cynthia, if you're saying something. There you are.
I didn't have my hand up.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I'm sorry about that. Well, anything you wanted to add?
I just would like to add, Ramses, that was beautifully said. Like that was beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing that.
You are so beautiful,
How are you? Look at your little shiny self. Little squishy boo. Sorry.
All right. Okay, Joe, you are up next.
Yeah, I was the one who wrote that question about if we're differentiating between K through 12 and higher education. I mean, I was never beyond, bachelor level study to be able to know, like, if, grad study was different. I mean, you have to come up with your own ideas. That's one thing different about the format as grad students do that I didn't do. And the other thing is that all college basically had in common that was different than K through 12 is that it was voluntary. And is the voluntary aspect, you think, the biggest thing, or is it the format? Because the format was the same in a lot of ways, in the undergrad programs. You take the test, you read the writing, you do the coursework. Not a whole lot of original thinking there, except for maybe what you designed. I was kind of an art major, architecture, but that was about it. Would you say this is the voluntary quality is the difference primarily, or is it other stuff?
Good points, Joe. I will respond to that on my next turn. So we're going to go to Dan first.
I just wanted to throw in that, again, the curricula or the curriculum, what is actually being taught, I think matters a lot. And in our society today, there is tremendous ignorance, even though so many people have, say, graduated high school or even attended some college. And what I find is people don't understand what's going on in the world in really any way, shape, or form. They don't, you could ask somebody who's graduated high school or even gone to college, could you show me on a map, where Afghanistan is? And if you can show me where it is on a map, can you tell me what kind of people live there? What's the population mix, et cetera? Because we've been at war with Afghanistan since what, 2001, and so all these things go on, that people who are in the power positions in our culture, in our society, they just go ahead and do a lot of things that they choose to do, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. And we have a population which is not able to understand even, really what's going on. And we know today, you're not going to get that out of the corporate media at all. And so it's a huge problem. You need to be educated about many things, including how to critically think. How do you do that? What is critical thinking? And let's have you learn that and apply it so that you could interpret what's going on. And as far as college goes, my experience in college was when I went, they did require a number of courses. You had to take maybe a history course or a geography course or something, and maybe one course in another sector, and then you had your major and your minor. But again, people would sometimes select things which seemed just interesting to them. I have no interest in history, or I have no interest in geography. It's boring. But the thing is, there's certain areas which maybe are boring on a certain level, but they're very important to learn. And usually those areas which are boring, if you get to a certain level, they then become interesting a lot of the time. And I just, it's so regrettable that in high school, except maybe in some very elite private schools, and some elite public schools. There's a few high schools in Chicago and a number out in the suburbs that are fairly elite, and you get, I'm imagining, a pretty decent education, or at least you used to. And it's just, people need to be much better educated. Doing homeschooling, I think, has some advantages on certain level, but again, you shouldn't have to even be thinking about homeschooling. It shouldn't have to be a problem. We ought to be able to have in a public education system the kinds of things that you're talking about. If you're living in a rural area, an agricultural type area, it would be useful to learn certain things about that. And to get it in high school, and and for everybody, not divide people up. You need to go to a vocational high school because you're not supposedly smart enough to work in another area. That's what they used to do, a lot. And again, I think the homeschooling, I understand it. And I just think it's very regrettable that you have to come to that sort of idea or conclusion because of how bad the other systems are.
Thank you so much, Dan. Really interesting points. Marcin, what do you have to say?
I also liked Dan's points. I actually really like the Vulcan system of education, and I think that's the way things are going now. I see that more educational systems are going into virtual schooling. I see there's some real estate platforms that are doing this thing where you virtually walk into a classroom and you sit next to your classmates and you can have some banter back and forth while you're still educating yourself, kind of like in a university setting. I think that's the way education is going with Khan Academy and other educational platforms. I just really think we should have a major investment within education to reform it. It's been the same for ages now, and it needs a major makeover. And it should be democratic also. Like there are certain topics that are required. Mathematics is obviously good to know if you're gonna know what 1 + 1 is. That should be required. So those should be decided by a community, not some school board out in Texas somewhere. And the discrepancies between educational systems. I went to a high school where there were bullet holes in the windows, and we needed to walk around during winter time to keep ourselves warm. The guy that was made Supreme Court judge went to a school with a golf course in the back of it. So you know, if we could have even a national educational system that's virtual, that anybody could come in, that has the same education regardless if you're you know, a billionaire or out on the street, that would be ideal. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. So, okay, so a couple of things I have to say. Touching on the curriculum, this is a subject Dan brought up, and I think Joe brought up as well. The curriculum is important. I think that when kids are young, there's a lot of things that they shouldn't even be, a lot of things that shouldn't be imposed upon them. They should be able to form their own ideologies when they're young. I mean, there's a really interesting book. It's called Emily or Emile. It was written by Rousseau. So Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And he had an interesting philosophy that we shouldn't even teach kids to read until they're old enough to understand what words actually are. Because it really goes to the point is, what is intelligence? Somebody might be able to read 10 books or read an entire book at a super young age, but does that mean they're intelligent? Because if we think about it, words are something that's just a man-made construct. Every single animal has a natural language, and that natural language is instinct. So words are just a way to express instinct. It really doesn't have much to do with intelligence. I think intelligence is how in tune with reality are you? And it's kind of hard when we talk about these ideas in comparison to modern society, because modern society is so removed from reality that these ideas don't even make sense to the average person in modern society. But I guess what I would say, the curriculum should be very general in the beginning, just kind of the basic things like financial education, general understanding, and just the way, a lot of it has to do with the parents. The parents are so important. The issue is most of the parents in modern society are lost too. So they're not good role models for the kids. So what we really have to do is, that's why I'm all for small scale independent communities, to where strong individuals come together, they create families, the families become strong families, the kids are raised with great role models to look up to. They can learn from their mother, who should be a woman secure in her femininity, and their father, who's a man secure in his masculinity. They have great role models within the community. That's the ideal society. But once again, if we're talking about reforming education on a grand scale, it's a different subject and a different story. Something else about higher education. Yeah, okay. So the things that people learn when they're older will be different than when they're younger. I guess what I'm trying to say is we should have a very general curriculum in the beginning, and then it should be more specialized when kids are older. So there's no reason why every single 9th grader should be forced to learn biology, because most of them don't care about biology. I didn't. I hated the class. And but some kids will be interested in biology, and when they're old enough to really know their interests, then they should take that class. But we shouldn't force specialized classes on especially young kids. They shouldn't have to learn anything that they're not genuinely interested in. And once again, the basic values of life, they shouldn't even have to be taught verbally in a classroom. They should just learn them from growing up in a stable community. That's all for now. Next up is, let's see, who is after me? Is it, I believe was it Ramses and then Dan?
We're up to Dan now, is the only one in line.
Okay, we have Dan, and then Ramses will be next, and then I think Joe, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, you didn't answer the part about the voluntary aspect of it, but that's okay. You can cover that if you want.
Okay, sure. So so voluntary aspect, were you saying, should it be voluntary to go to school?
Well, what I'm saying is that one of the differences between, like an indoctrination and actual education?
Yes, I do think it should be voluntary. I don't think school should be compulsory at all. People should choose, and ideally, the parents who send their kids to school should actually be investing in that school and be a huge part of what the curriculum is. So if you're going to send your kid to be educated by somebody other than you, you should actively know what's going on. You should be paying to fund the curriculum, and it should be voluntary. If a family chooses not to send their kid to school or homeschool them at all and just raise them up however they choose to, that should be allowed. Does that answer, Joe? Okay, great. So Dan is next, and then we'll go to Ramses.
Okay, yeah, Megan, I just wanted to elaborate on a point you just made. Where you're talking about, humans with language and animals have their own communication systems. I think that, with humans, it's really important to remember that one thing that differentiates humans from other species is that we survive by modifying environments to adapt to us. That's part of what we do. We also have to adapt, but we're really big on, engineering environments to suit us, as opposed to naturally evolving in an environment. And some species die out because they don't adapt, etc. But I think in terms of education, a lot of what we get educated about is how to modify everything to suit our needs as human beings, our basic needs, really. And that level of kind of understanding things, just as an example, I think it's important for people to be educated to and again, just kind of I think, as you said early on, to know who they are, and that's part of who we are, and that differentiates us from I think any other species, where we just big time engineer environments the way we think we need them to be. We don't ourselves adapt so much, and where every other species is totally a slave to adaptability. They just, and I just want to, I think that that is part of what needs to be taught. As you said, I think, again, if I recall in the beginning, you need to learn who you are, what human nature is, how we are as a group, and all of that. And it's not taught, and people don't really understand a lot of things. And again, whether you get that through it's just, again, I understand that homeschooling perfectly. I don't criticize anybody for turning to it for various reasons, but it's regrettable that it has to be that way now. That we can't have school systems which are flexible, have strong, curricula, and that most people would be comfortable in it, and you wouldn't have to save your children by taking them out of the educational system. Thank you.
Very interesting points, Dan. I think I agree. And one thing I want to say before I hand it over to Ramses is, that's definitely my philosophy. It's self-knowledge first. So that's why it's important to have a very general curriculum for young kids, because we shouldn't enforce any kind of specialized information until they know who they are and they understand the purpose of why they're here. Ramses, go ahead.
I agree with what Megan has said, and I agree with Dan as well. I just wanted to mention that no, we don't need to learn biology in order to understand ourselves. Okay, I would think that biology is a necessary subject to biologists themselves. Not everybody. No one needs to understand evolution, for example, in order for us to adapt. And we are adapting now, not because of our understanding of evolution, but because people like after school, people usually do what they want. Okay, and these are the things that we need. People need to do what they want, and we need elective courses. If we are gonna implement schools, we need elective courses from day one. Our children need to learn how to make decisions. They need to learn how they can discover their their ambitions by themselves, like what their passions, what they are passionate about. They need to discover that. They need to express that. Like, hey, school, I think I like music, so I'm gonna take music classes, and so on. And age of consent is not a problem here. Like, seriously, we are not having our children making sex. It is just to choose what they want to learn. It is not a big problem. And finally, I would say, if you give the opportunity to children to choose what they want to learn, and at the same time, by the way, there is a misconception that if they didn't learn biology or history, then they are fucked up like for forever. This is not true. Actually, what I discovered after finishing school is that I can continue learning. And there are people who continue to go to school even when they are 70 years old. Learning is a process that's continuous as long as we are alive. And now, because I am free, I am not a slave anymore, I learn whatever I want. Okay, so I keep reading, and every one of us is like that. And guys, you should be happy about it. You should appreciate it. You should appreciate the freedom that you can read the book that you want. You know, this is something great. Can you imagine that our children do not have this freedom? Finally, for the curriculum, I would agree that of course it has to focus on critical thinking and other stuff, but they claim that our curricula actually teach students how to critically think and how to do analytics and all this kind of stuff. So curriculum itself is very subjective, in my opinion. And back at the school, there are some courses that I hated that now I really come back to, and I feel like I'm enjoying studying them back. That being said, just give the people the freedom to choose, the freedom for choice, and this will solve all your problems, man. And actually will clear your liability. That's it for me.
Beautifully put, Ramses. I agree with everything you said right there. All right, so Cesare is going to go, and then after that, we're going to go ahead and move into closing remarks. But go ahead, Cesare.
So a few thoughts. First of all, I think we need to be putting more money into schooling. It's one of those things that, or education, excuse me. We need to be putting in more money into educating because we can't afford not to, really, to provide the learning opportunities that children need. But I was thinking about, so that's what we're talking about. It got me to reflect on really what the problem is. I think it was about biology. I hated biology, but you know what? I'm glad that they made me take it. I really am. I would be, yeah, I'm really glad they made me take it. I would be so much dumber. And it's actually inspired me in ways that I would have never imagined that it did. I would have never taken biology, but it has been useful. And yeah, people might not become biologists, but I think it's really important that people know what they don't know, because I think people take biology so that they're exposed to it, to know that there's a whole science to it, instead of just I can make up, no, just all the creatures were just created by God or something, or make up some other stupid idea like that. No, people need to know that there are actually people who are taking this seriously and have built a whole science, and it's been tested. So I think it's really important. It's a humbling experience, and I think people need to experience that. However, because I was thinking about, I was also thinking about music, and I felt the same way. Like I was a musician. I studied music for a while when I was in college, but when I was a child, they forced me to take music classes, and honestly, it just ruined my taste for music for many, many years. And I was thinking, but I don't think it was a bad thing that they try to teach me music. What the problem was the fear that if I did not do what they wanted me to do as well as they wanted me to, that I would not be able to move on to the next grade or something like that. It was that fear of failure or not meeting certain standards. So I think actually what we should have is still schooling, still education, but and of course we should have elective classes like Ramses is taking, but we should have these core classes. But if you fail a class, you should still be able to continue. Just keep going. Go on to the next class. Or if you want to, so it's not okay, maybe you didn't take this class very seriously, and sure, you messed up algebra 1 or whatever, then you go on to algebra 2. Sure, they let you right into algebra 2. But you should still have tests. The grading is not the problem. The problem is the fear that if you fail enough tests that you get held back. So the point is if you let people move on to the class, even if they fail the class, if you let them move on to the next class, people will actually come to the point and be like, oh, wait a minute, this is just like a waste of my time and it's humiliating. Maybe I need to go back to the other class and learn that stuff for me to continue. So I think it creates a more personal incentive for people to actually learn this stuff. If people are allowed to continue advancing in their schooling, but they can move backwards if they feel that they missed some things or they should retake it. So I think that's what we should do is eliminate this whole graduation aspect. Maybe for universities and for elected education, we should have this this graduation process, but maybe schooling shouldn't actually have a graduation component. It should just be like, here are the classes, here's the curriculum and you get a grade, and you will be graded. The teachers will still give you grades, but if you get all Fs, like in every single class, okay, you finished your schooling. That's it. Okay, no sweat. You didn't give a damn. Okay, but we wanted you to know that things like biology, things like music exist, and that there's actually a whole body of knowledge, so that later, if in the future, much like I did, I decided that I actually wanted to be a musician for some time, then I knew what I was getting myself into. I could actually look back on all that exposure that I had early on, and it gave me a good idea of how much there is to know. So anyways, that's my thought. I think we should eliminate graduation. That's the problem. I yield. Thank you.
Very interesting point, Cesare. I haven't heard that mentioned before, but that's definitely something to think about. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and move into closing remarks now. Very interesting discussion tonight. So, Alex, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I enjoyed the discussion. I thought it was an interesting essay. I think there was some stuff at the end that didn't get quite discussed thoroughly enough. So I think I'm still a maybe, but thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Alex. Yeah, we'll probably have to continue this discussion sometime. Stacy, would you like to share your closing remarks?
Another mind-bending discussion. Thank you very much, Megan. And boy, I just agree. And I think it was a great discussion to talk about. I love being able to talk about how much I disliked school and ideas of changing it. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Ilya, I just want to welcome Ilya. You just joined us last minute. We're concluding now, but still welcome. Joe, any closing remarks?
Yeah, maybe part of the next discussion could be how this concerns brain development. I think that's a big thing too. We all want to get smarter somehow, and I'm hoping that some of you can put some suggestions for chat groups tonight, because I'm stuck in the airport and I need something to do.
All right, if anybody has suggestions for Joe, please put that in the chat. We wish you the best, Joe. All right, Marcin, you are up next if you have any closing remarks to share.
I just wanted to thank you for this essay also. It was really good. I hope more people start to focus on our educational system because it really does need to be reformed. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcin, for joining us. Cesare, any closing remarks?
Yes, thank you very much. Very interesting. So, I am supporting currently. This idea has a lot of support in Egora. This idea about education system reform. It's idea 281. Education system should cater to the diverse needs and talents of learners. It starts out with that. But so I am thinking about editing this idea and introducing a new version of it. And I'm thinking about adding 2 sections to it. And the first section would be to treat school as labor and to actually pay students for attending. I do think schooling is child labor, so I think our society should be compensating students. Probably not at the earlier ages because they don't really value that, or maybe it should be built up over time or something. And then only later would the students have access once they completed more education. But yeah, so we should be paying children for going to school, and that's going to be a part of that. And then the other, I'm going to develop this idea talking about how we should be eliminating the graduation process from schooling, make it just based on attendance and completing or at least attending the required courses. So yeah, so keep a lookout for a new idea that's going to be coming from me, within maybe a few weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cesare. Interesting ideas. Ramses, any closing remarks?
Yeah, of course. It was an awesome discussion. I was talking about schooling, not education or educazione or educare in Latin. And I have an idea already about eliminating graduation from high education and to restructure the whole high education system so that people can learn what they need, not what the university wants them to learn. University is university. The word university comes from universe, but who needs university in order to work as a truck driver? And so that he can ask his roommate. I'm pretty sure that he never needed any single course of what they teach at university. And one last word. I probably may share the idea with you once I get back to my computer. And I already showed it to Sazahi before, but he told me that it is very ridiculous. So I knew that it's really nice. And thank you guys for the awesome discussion.
Thank you so much, Ramses. I agree. Okay, Dan, would you like to share your closing remarks?
Yeah, well, again, a very interesting discussion. And the material that was being discussed is of critical importance to any society. And the only thing I just throw in there, one of my main areas of focus in our public school system, children are being they're not equal in terms of coming out of the gate, in the sense that we have so many kids going to school, they don't eat breakfast, they walk in there eating sweets, they have a great difficulty focusing, people are more irritable, anxious, etc. And that isn't really addressed in the way it should. I mean, everybody, with homeschooling, you can control that set of factors quite nicely, but when you're going into a public school, you haven't eaten breakfast or you're just eating, candy, this kind of thing, it's terrible. And a lot of these kids get stereotyped as either being not very smart or they have attention deficit, disorder problems, and they end up getting medicated and put into a very unfortunate situation. And so I just wanted to throw that in there. And again, to thank everybody for a really nice discussion.
Thank you so much, Dan. I always appreciate your insight. I can tell you're a very well-educated person, especially in this realm. So thank you. Now, Ilya, you joined us last minute, but we talked about education. Any thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, I was just wondering where is it streaming. So I just wanted to play it on 2x speed and catch up, but I couldn't find it. So sorry.
That's okay. We do have this recorded if you want to go back and watch it. So now we're up to my closing remarks. So I have a lot of things to say on this subject, so I'll have to do more about it. But I think the best thing to do would be, well, first to say that I don't really agree with any kind of education reform because the modern school system was built on something that I don't stand for. And I think once most of us do the research, we see it was built on a flawed structure. So reforming it, pouring more money into it is just going to make it worse. Actually, it makes the system better, but for us, it makes it worse. And just to really show you the extent, I put it in the chat, but I'm going to share it on here as well. So this was the public mission statement of the General Education Board. It was released in 1916. And it's from a book called The Country School Tomorrow. It's very short. It was published as occasional paper #1 of the board. And this segment was their public mission statement. So it might be kind of hard to read, but it says, "Is there aught a remedy for this neglect of rural life? Let us at least yield ourselves to the gratifications of a beautiful dream that there is. In our dream, we have limitless resources, and the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hand. The present educational conventions fade far from our minds, and unhampered by tradition, we work our own goodwill upon a grateful and responsive rural folk. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers or men of learning or of science. We are not to raise up from among them authors, orators, poets, or men of letters. We shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor will we cherish even the humbler ambition to raise up from among them lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, of whom we now have ample supply." So I'm going to jump a little bit and skip to where it says, "For the task that we set before ourselves is a very simple as well as a very beautiful one, to train these people as we find them for a perfectly ideal life, just where they are. Yes, ideal. Call it idyllic if you'd like. An idyllic life under the skies and within the horizon, however narrow, when they first open their eyes." So that is a public mission statement of the education system that we have today. So that's all I have to close with. Food for thought. But thank you everybody for being here and for all the great insight that everybody provided. This idea is once again in Egora, and we'll go ahead and do one more show of hands. Who just generally supports this idea that we need less school, not more? Okay, Stacy, Cesare does, I do. Ramses, your hand is up, but I don't know if that was from earlier.
I think so, but I agree.
Okay, great. Dan is kind of so-so. Alex, Marcin, and Joe, I suppose, are abstaining.
I'm so as well.
Okay. All right. And then I guess Ilya is probably abstaining too since he missed the idea. Okay, great. Well, this idea is in Egora, so if you'd like to support it, you can. Let me actually share that before I forget, just in case. And then Ilya, if you want to see it in the chat too, here we are. Perfect. Okay. So for our viewers and listeners, if you like this idea, don't forget to support it in egora-ilp.org. Also in Egora, you will find information for our upcoming events. And last but not least, you should like our page and join our group on Facebook, which is facebook.com/groups/Citizen Assembly.